So we're going to take, I think it's our last caller, and this person is Chris, him from the UK. And the note that I have here, I think it's a fun question. Is the flood of Noah a mythological archetype, or is it based on real historical events? Chris, Ben and I think I can speak for Ben, but Ben will smack me down if I can't. What do you think? And then we'll share our thoughts.
Yeah. Thank you. It's great to be on the show.
Great to have you.
My thought is that perhaps the flood of Noah, all cultures around the world have some myth about a giant flood. So I'm wondering, is it one of these mythological archetypes which just naturally emerge, such as, the hero's journey in the creation myth? Or is it based on the shifting of the continents and land bridges falling aside and, things like that,
Yeah. So you just wonder, you don't have an opinion, or what? If you were you're a betting man.
I don't necessarily, no.
Okay. All right. Ben?
Yeah.
Thoughts?
So I'm not a historian. I don't do a lot of work in mythology, but I mean, I could definitely see that it's possible that, you do see these archetypes across mythologies, and I could definitely see the flood myth being one of those as well, especially since the majority of societies were built around water, and your perceived world was around you. You didn't have much experience beyond what was local to you. So it makes sense that this is a common thing seen in mythology. But I mean, I have a question for you, I guess. Since I'm not as well versed in this, and you might not have strong opinions. I don't know. Johnny might have some very strong opinions. But how do you think we'd be able to tell if this is an archetype versus not? Like, what criteria are we going off of? How, if we don't have an answer, how could we get that answer?
Well, I must admit I'm somewhat ignorant when it comes to these things, but possibly carbon dating is one answer. I suppose we could possibly dig down, see if there's any kind of erosion, things like that. That's possibly one answer. I think that you can detect water in different kinds of sediment. I may be wrong about that. As I say, I am woefully ignorant on the subject, but that might be one way of doing it. I suppose also we could just look at the geography of the earth as we know it and look at perhaps where there used to be land bridges, where there aren't anymore, how the continents split apart. And, that if there is if there's a correlation between where these flood myths emerge most and where there were formerly land bridges, because a lot of, humans in the past were quite nomadic. And so it's possible that they went to a place over a land bridge, and then, many years later, that land bridge had gone underwater, and that's possibly one origin of such mythology. But do you know any ways that we could possibly test these kinds of things?
Johnny, what are your thoughts?
I'm just a simple country lawyer. I don't know much about geology. I do know that there are plenty of people on YouTube these days who have gone on about flood mythology. I know Aaron Ra put out a video or 20 about that stuff. That might be worth looking at. Ra. Yeah, Aaron's fun. I like him. I didn't know who I am, but that's okay. But I'm here over on good old Wikipedia, and there's a whole bunch of material here, and I do know that there's a lot of flood myths all around the world. And I know that I have read the Epic of Gilgamesh that has a flood myth component to it, Utnapishtim and all those fun-loving folks from Mesopotamia. The flooding of the Nile, the flooding of the Tigris and the Euphrates, people living in ancient times were very dependent upon the ebb and flow of water levels in their agriculture and stuff like that. They depended upon that. the tsunamis and all that stuff out in Southeast Asia. It tears the hell out of their communities, but they also need that water to make it so incredibly fertile. Some of the most fertile land in the world is in an area where every couple of years things get ripped up because of heavy storms. So our cycles as a human being, again, I am not an anthropologist or anything like that, but I read a book or two, and it seems to me that when these cycles of nature, we live by them, we die by them, and they make their way into the fabric of our societies, sometimes into our laws, into our stories we tell about ourselves. How would we test that there was one great global flood? I mean, I guess we know from geology, or we have very good evidence from geology to know that the Earth has gone through several cycles of water levels rising and falling because of science and stuff. I don't think that our flood myth comes from, is it the Devonian period? Somebody trash me online because I don't know what it's called, but where things are underwater. I don't think our myths come from that. I think they're much more localized.
And that was my question, I guess, for you, Chris, is that when we're talking about this question, are you wondering if if there are components of the myth that are true? Are you talking global evidence, or maybe if there are pockets of evidence that this was a local flood one place and then another local flood another place? Is the sum of that evidence something that you're looking for? Or what scale does your question fall under?
Even if there wasn't a global flood, and I do find it slightly tricky to believe that there was a flood that engulfed the entire Earth. But even if there was a smaller scale, water level rising, possibly after the last ice age, because often what happens, is that the clouds, snow falls from the clouds, and that becomes hard, and that becomes glaciers. And, when these glaciers eventually melt, and it does take them a very long time to melt, that essentially becomes water. And so that's possibly a cause of sea levels rising. And so even if there wasn't a global flood, it's possible that, ancient people mistook land bridges disappearing, or falling under the water, or the ocean levels rising, and they mistook that as a flood. Or, that's possibly where some of their fears about floods came from.
It's possible. I don't have a whole lot to disagree with there.
Right. But again, how would we test that's the case? I mean, we can have this idea floating on in our head that that's a possibility of where these flood myths come from, but we can't ask them. Those people didn't leave records, not written records at least. Their mythologies may contain the kernel of that, but in large part, I don't even think we have the mythologies of those people. I might be wrong, trash me on the internet, but I think once people settle down and they start, mucking about with clay tablets or chiseling in stone, you start seeing there's so much we don't know about our ancestors. It really is irksome because aside from, cutting people's heads off and making sport of their enemies, they would have had some really interesting ways of looking at the world, like I'm saying, where they were immersed in the cycles. They were very vulnerable to the cycles of nature. Yeah. And that, I think that carries over to this day. We have biological things that we are limited by, we have to deal with, but we've in many instances, I mean, aside from the poor people who get their homes trashed in like Malaysia and those places because of typhoons, we're kind of in this country. Unless, again, you're part of a flood on the Mississippi River. Okay, I'm making exceptions, but I'm generally immune from the forces of the most violent forces of nature. I can get in my car and drive away from the tidal wave. I can get away from the hurricane. But we're just speculating, and it's a shame that we don't know more. What I don't want to do is make a claim that these flood myths have a unified shared history that inspire them. right? Because I went on Wikipedia here, okay? And so, it's the best source. But they've got the Genesis flood. There's Nuh, or N-U-H, in Islam. That's one. There's one in Hinduism, Chinese.
Oh, that's just like Noah, I believe.
Right. And then there's one in Hinduism.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're good. There's a delay. Chinese mythology. There's one in Greek mythology, Norse mythology, Irish, Polynesia, Hawaii, some folks in Mesoamerica. I can't pronounce it. Mayan people in Mesoamerica, the Ojibwa tribe, Incas, and plenty of other ones in South America, Africa, and Aboriginal tribes in Australia. And if we were really pushing for it, we could say, well, look, all of these people, they have a flood myth. That tells me that God sent a flood, and but I don't think we need to do that. I think that's overstating the case.
Yeah,
we can say that these people all had.
I mean, you could do the same thing with like an earth deity. Like many cultures had some earth deity, but it's because we have a shared experience of all being on this planet. And so it's like we can't then take a coincidence of a shared being on a planet and then say, well, obviously God gave us the same message to have this like earth religion now. Yeah. Like it's a stretch, and you're taking a common coincidence and then giving extra meaning to it than it should have.
Well, folks in chat, I usually have YouTube open and I can read the comments of some of the really good stuff that people are saying. And I'm wondering if anyone could share a link in there or again, send an email where they talk about it. How would you test for a global flood? What scientific experiments would you have? Because we know, like I said, I think the scientific consensus is that the water levels on Earth have been up and down over the billions of years that it's been around.
Yeah.
But what would you do to try to figure out if one took place within the human scale of existence, right? You can't dust for water. We know they can't take fingerprints.
Yeah.
But there's other things they might be able to do, like water levels. I know when there's great volcanic eruptions that take place on the Earth, they can test for certain elements or certain chemicals, and they show there's a band across the Earth, and that's how we know that there was a super volcano that went off some time ago, right?
Yeah, and that's definitely like outside my area of expertise. Like I want somebody that studies floods and who studies geology and all of this, and then in conjunction with that, it'd have to be a team effort with them and historians who understand the mythology to really kind of establish what we're going for. But this is a super interesting discussion, like nonetheless. I mean, again, it is speculation.
Yeah.
So,
I know here at the Freethought Library, we've got just a bunch of books. All right. And I will encourage people who are interested in learning more about it. YouTube videos are great, and conversations with a doctor and an alleged lawyer, doctor to be, and an alleged lawyer.
Yet. Maybe 9 months.
Yeah. That's good. And the hosts are fun, and there's a lot of smart people here and in the room as well. But this is the kind of thing where if you really want to understand it, there's going to be books involved. There's going to be some reading. Have you read anything about flood mythology? I know that if I spent a couple minutes, I'd find something here in the Freethought Library located on Canigleg here in beautiful Austin, Texas. But have you read anything yourself?
I'm afraid I haven't. The question has sort of just come to me today, and so I haven't really looked into it much. But I thought, that would be a great question to call in about. And please don't be, in any way worried about not knowing about geology or the subject matter necessarily, because I myself, I'm woefully ignorant on science, although I am trying to learn. But at the end of the day, all of our knowledge pales in comparison to the knowledge out there. So, I really appreciate you having this chat with me. Well,
I appreciate it, Chris. And I think was it Bilbo or was it Frodo that says every journey begins with a single step? I don't know. That could be someone else entirely. But start just pick up a book. Do research maybe to try to find like Goodreads is a great website that I look to see if it's more democratic than I like. Because people have a lot of bad opinions. If enough people with bad opinions get together, they can give you a 5-star rating for a garbage book.
Oh, that's true.
But look into it and maybe start from there. But I appreciate it. You take care, Chris, and call back if you find something.
Too.
Share the knowledge.
Thank you, I will.
All right, you take care.